Okay, so let's go back to the next example which we have here, which is Spring MVC with annotations. So what this does is that, again, let's start. Control Shift F4 in Windows is going to close all the open files. That's what I use. So after that you go to this pom.xml. Now in the pom.xml again we will see all the configurations which are done. So this JUnit is for testing, so let's not worry about it as of now. Then you have this Spring Web MVC Commons file upload which is there, this Commons IO, then the servlet definition, and that's it. So that's all about whatever is needed for annotations, nothing great, nothing more. Okay. Now what we have to look forward here is, first of all, what all we have. So we have all the necessary configurations here. Okay. So we have controller, we have model, and we have validator. So validator means that whatever data comes from the UI, if you want to build a validation around it, that is also possible. And for that we have written this validator. Okay. And then you have uh, then you have this dispatcher servlet.xml. So let's start from the very basic. So I generally start from pom.xml, we go to the web.xml, we'll find out what the configuration is, then go on to the servlet, then go on to the appropriate details or things here. Okay. So if you see the web.xml, what we have here is that we have again that if, where is the mapping? See, any URL which ends with .htm, the servlet which listens to it is MVC-dispatcher, and that is basically this dispatcher servlet. Okay. Now here we have again used the same XML. This is not required, but if the XML name is something else, like say ram.xml, sham.xml, change it here. You can use it. So you have the option of using the names which you want. You just have to configure it. Okay. And then in the Spring MVC you can also configure the error pages according to your wish. So here if 404 is error, you want to show this, you have to show this 404 page. If the exception type is java.lang.exception, again you want to show the same page, configure it. So depending on the different error codes, you can configure uh, different values. Okay. So that's all about it. Now let's move forward to the controller. Okay. Before controller, let's see the model and JSP. So this is the thing. So we have this as a model. So model, as told earlier, is just a normal poser. So it holds a data which comes in from the UI. So that if the controller has all the information, it has data also, GSP also, business logic also. I mean, that's the basic idea behind MVC, right? That it should not become a hodgepodge. So to separate it, we have this model, which is a POJO, and for everything which is on the UI, you have a corresponding field here to store that data. All the input from the GUI. So if you come here and see the JSP, this is a JSP. Yes, all the input which you give on the UI, that is having a reference in this particular model. So if you see this customer form and see one by one, so initially what we have this HTML and start and end, then you have this head where you have defined the styles, okay, and then you have this form. So this is what is there. The command name is customers, which basically means that I mean, here you're just referring via, what do you say, you can go via the command is basically saying that try to find a similar in the controller using this one, that whatever is the name here. So that is what is being configured here in this command name. Okay. Then you have any errors which is there on the page in this form colon errors, you can show this on the top itself. So that's what form colon errors does. And to use the appropriate styling, we have this CSS class here. Okay. Now inside this table, you have everything defined. So you see here you have username, and then you have this for colon input. Path has username. Now this username has to have, just once you submit the form, this data is going to go back to the server and it will be available in the request object. And Spring MVC gets the data from the request object, stores in the corresponding form, and that corresponding form in this case is customer. So this is a corresponding form which you are looking at. Okay, here is where the data is stored. So is it clear, Shala? Did you understand what model holds on to? Shala, you understood? Okay. Now, so similar to this form code inputs, we are the next step is form code and errors here. So if you have any errors which you want to send back to the UI, you can configure it like whatever has been done here. So this means that there is one error which will come at the top of the file, okay, top of the JSP, top of the UI, and then next to the individual path names also will get the necessary individual fields also you'll get the necessary details. Okay, so that's how it works. Then you have this address field. Now in this address field again, since address field is not like small, it's big, we have used text area for it. So you have form colon text area, then you define the path, and then you have this errors. Okay, so similarly for password, so form colon password, what it does is that it avoids that particular you will not see the actual things which you are typing. You just see like that big dot which comes in. So for that we have this form colon password. Again you have this confirm password field. Then you have whether you want to subscribe or not. For that we have a checkbox. Okay, on the UI. So if you have a checkbox, you use form colon checkbox and then the actual value for it. Okay, then you have like number of checkboxes. So if you want to use that, then you have form colon checkboxes. Okay, and then you define the value for it. Okay, now after that you have the gender, which is male or female, and then you have choose a number which you'll see. So again it's a sort of radio button, like you have to choose 1 2 whatever. Okay, then you have to choose the country where you belong to. Okay, that is coming with form colon options, and then you give the entire value here. Okay, so that's your drop down. So this is the entire UI which we are seeing as of now, and then you have form colon select. This is for Java skills. Okay, so this is your entire form. Okay, now from this particular form, the data which you have now the everything would be mapped up in the model side. So if you see here and see this customer class, it has everything whatever we discussed right now. So you have all those attributes and you have the getters and setters for it. So that is what the model data has. Okay, and controller is just has a business logic. It's the orchestrated. Okay, so that's how this entire flow works. But let's see. What we'll do now is we're going to give you a better idea. We're going to deploy it. So this thing I've already deployed here. You see it's available. Let me go back and start my Tomcat. Okay, so my Tomcat is up now. Now let's go back here. Now my context root is this one. Yes, dynamic web application. So this is a form which we are discussing about. Okay. So you enter the username here, address here, password here, confirm password. Then newsletter had only one checkbox, right? That is what it is. Then your favorite framework has multiple checkboxes. Then you have the gender. You have to choose your favorite number. So it's a radio button, so you only choose one of it. Then you have to choose the country. Then you can choose multiple Java skills which you have. So that is also possible. Now here, let's try to do a normal summit. See, if we do a normal summit, and in the XML, in our server side, we have the validation. So basically, validation is built in two ways. You have the server side validation and you have the client side validation. And in the client side, we normally use JavaScripts, but anyway, that is out of scope as of our discussion. So what we do here is that once you submit the form, it goes to the server, and then we have validation on the server side. Now the validation on the server side which we have, like there we have, it's depending on a class. So there we have check for everything, like what was mentioned here: username, address, password, confirm password, and country is essential. So as we saw earlier, this form colon errors field which was there, that is showing you all the information here, and then for the individual fields also where you wanted the error, it is shown. Okay, so let's go back to the JSP. So this is a JSP form colon errors. Okay, here we are defining that whatever is the error which is associated with this particular field, show it in this particular tag, and that's what we are doing here. The same thing goes for all the fields, and then at the top level also we had defined form colon errors, and for any path, not for username, not for address, for any path. So you just mention it here because the upgrade CSS block. CSS basically is style. So this red and this border etc. is coming because of CSS. You give that, and that's it. So this is coming because of the things which you defined at the top. Okay. So this is how it comes. Now this is form colon like normal input. Okay. Let's try parallel because it's very important to write a proper JSP also, right? That's how you'll be able to like write an end-to-end application. So you have this form colon input which is here, which is an input. Then you have address, since it's a free form text field. This is how we write it here for address. Okay. Then you have this password, form colon password. Okay. And then you have this checkbox. So this for this checkbox we have only form colon checkbox and the corresponding path, right? And then you have what is your favorite web framework. So you have form colon check boxes. Why? Because you have number of check boxes here. Okay. So coming back to form colon check boxes, then you define the items, which is what you have to show here, that you have to check from, that you have to get from web framework list, but the data will be stored in the this particular attribute framework in the form in the model object. If you go here and search for framework, so this is an array of strings. Okay, and this data is coming from the controller, like what is the data which you want to load in the starting, that we can configure in the framework. So that is coming from here. Okay, now then again after that, coming back here, until now we had checkboxes, now we have a radio button. So radio button can be configured using form colon radio button. The path is same, the path has a value here. Okay, we'll find the value here, and then you come here and you have choose a number. So you have to choose a number. Again, radio buttons, it goes on a similar concept. They have a favorite number, and then whatever you want to display items, that is that either you can mention it here directly, it's not a problem, or you can get the values from the Spring MVC. Okay, from the controller. So we'll see how it works. After that, you will show the form colon errors here. Then you have the country, and for country we have this form colon select. This is the entire block. The path is country, so it means that in the form object you have this country, and then this is the default one which comes up at the top. Okay, and then all the options you give below. So if you come and see here, this is unselect which is coming up, which basically stands for that you have selected the value as none. But for everything else, you can go ahead and select anything, any of the values which are there. And just for an example, your example. Okay. Now let's go back and see my controller class. Okay. So this is my controller. Now here is controller. What we have is a validator. So we have a reference to a validator. We have auto wired it, and I hope that you are aware of it because of the Spring Beans classes we had earlier. It's basically a way of saying that you this is how you auto wire bean of type customer validated into the framework. Okay, and once you have that, you come here. Okay, and then you do your work. So this is like for when you're trying to submit the file, this is the mapping which you use. When you're trying to do a get, this is the method which you use. Okay, and the request memo for the entire class is defined here, but this can be defined individually as well, like this mapping, this slash customer.html, that you can define here. Okay, that you can define here also individually. Now the next one is this popular web framework list. So if you remember, this web framework list was there in the JSP as well, and I told you I will tell you later. So see, this is what it is there. You have, this is what is being used here. So this value is being populated from the customer controller. So you, if you want to populate a particular model attribute, then you can, what is the method, at the top of it you write that add model attribute, then it becomes clear that whatever is there is the output from that method, that is basically one of the model attributes only. Okay, so here you have defined a web framework list. You have put all the values here: Spring MVC, struts1, struts2, JSF, Apache Wicket, Apache Felix. Whatever you want to put, you can put here. Okay, now the next one is init binder. So it means that with a particular data in the UI which we have not used here, like if you want to use a date. So if you want to use a date field, then you have to bind that if this particular date field is there, then which editor to use. Okay, so that pop-up which comes up on a UI, right? That when you like say want to enter a date and you see a small pop-up which comes up where you select the date, that is because editor is associated with it. That's how you associate the editor here in the case of Spring MVC. So you have this web data binder. So you bind that for this particular date class you have this custom date editor. So I have not used it in my in my definition here. We can definitely I can definitely show you later. Okay. Then again, in the same way as we had web framework list, we have this number list here. We put all the data is populated. Then similarly for Java skills. Okay. So in this way we have populated everything: country list, Java skills, favorite web framework, etc. Whatever has to be shown on the UI, that has been populated here. Okay. And once you have populated everything, like say if you are hitting this slash customer.html, now I have done this slash customer.html. This is a URL which I have hit, right? Now this URL once I hit for the first time, okay, so just refresh it once. This is a URL which I hit first time when I'm hitting this URL. So in this case, we are not posting any data. This is a normal get call. So for get call, this particular API would be called, right? So here, sorry, this is a post. So for get, we have this particular thing which gets called. So here what we're doing is we are getting the appropriate data. Okay, I mean we are creating a form object and setting what were some default values we want to set. So if you see, these values would be there. So here in Hibernate is selected by default, then Spring MVC is selected by default, just because you have set those values by default here. Okay, that's how you do it. And this is just a hidden value. That's why it's not showing you on the UI. Now you add this form object in the model and you return the customer form. So this basically means that you'll have to check in the now in the this particular file to see what has to be done with that name. So what has to be done with this name is you have to go to this view resolver. From there you have to append in the starting, then you have to append the name and then .jsp. So for that, if you see, we'll have customer form.jsp is the one, because customer form is being returned from here. Okay, and once that is getting returned, you come here and then this entire page is loaded. And in the top you have defined the command name as customer. So it means that with this particular attribute, the data is stored in your model. Okay, and that's how it has been stored also. So if you see this customer controller, and let's go back to this init form, you have this data here stored like this. Alright, so this is how it is stored. Okay, now if you enter data here, like say now I click on submit. Now this submit is going to give you the next page, right? Let's see what the submit does. So on submit, this is the method which gets called because this is the one which we have configured, that when the data is posted, you call this API. So what this does is it first runs the validation. That's why when it first ran, when I did it for the first time, at that time, since I had not provided any of the values, we got errors because of this validated. So what that validated does is that you first will validate it, and whatever is the result, so this is the result, so binding result. This is where you set the details in the customer validator. Okay, so if it has errors, then you return the same customer form. Any UI which you want to render, because that's the work of the view. If not, then you go to the success page. Okay, so this is how your flow will work. Then coming back here to customer validator. Now this is just like overridden method which is then validated. So just basically stands for whether the class for which you have called this is supported by uh, this validator or not. So this is just that call, it gets called by the framework. And then you have this validate API which you have to implement, because that is the one which gets called. So you check here this validate API what all you want to do. So validation utils is one of the framework classes, okay, which is given by Spring Framework itself. To what it does is that it implements some of the work for you. So in the sense that it implements some of the normal validations like empty check, null check, all these things are done by validation utils. Okay. Now it checks for validation utils, checks for reject if empty or white space. So whether this particular field username is empty or not, that is being checked. Okay, if it is, then this errors object is populated. Okay, with what value? This whatever you have stored for this one. Now this is one of the details in the property file. So if you come here and see this customer.properties, right, it has this required username value, which is username is required. If this property file we are not able to find, then this is the default message where it will show. Okay, so the idea is that you have this username, you show the error which comes up here because of this, And if you do not want to show, if this is not available for one reason or the other on the session, I mean in the application, then you use this default method, this default message, and that's how it has been defined. So if you see, most of the fields are just checking for empty or white space, but if you want, you can have your own custom APIs. But you just have to follow whatever I've just told right now. If you implement your logic, if you find that there is error, you want to populate it, then you have to add that particular field to the errors object, and also the appropriate messaging. Okay. Now if you see here, this is what we have done in confirm password. So confirm password, we are not calling any of the uh, inbuilt APIs, right? So here we are doing our own validation. If it doesn't match, we are adding errors.reject value for which field, password, what is the what is the message which you want to show, that is being configured here. Similarly, we have for all other fields. Now once you come here, once you have done this and the control comes back here, now here you check that this binding result field, now this thing you are not calling yourself. The thing is that once you call this validator, this the Spring Framework only populates this binding result with the errors object, and it checks whether the error object is there or not. So if it is there, it has errors, then return the customer form, which is the this is the GSP which you want to load. Otherwise, you return this customer success. So this customer form.jsp gets loaded with all the appropriate errors because of form colon errors, whatever is there. So that's why you see those errors. But if your validation is fine, which was the case in this case with me, then in that case you have to load customer success.jsp. Okay. So let's see what is there in customer success.jsp. Customer success.jsp, we are getting details from the customer object, the model object which we have, and just showing it, right? Just showing it. So that's how it is being displayed also. I mean, since it is getting shown, we have used it. If you want to do anything else, you can do that, right? So this is just a simple example to help you with form handling using annotations. So is it clear till now?